I want to talk a little bit about masculine and feminine, because you know, like I was saying earlier, my interest in talking about feminine heroes and what that looks like, and part of my question was like, okay, does a feminine hero have a different kind of arc versus a masculine hero? And what I've come to realize is probably not, because it seems like what you're describing is not only that it can work for male or female, but also masculine or feminine, because you're mentioning characters that are going through the heroine's labyrinth, but they're also using violence, and that the opposite is also true, right? Because the hero's journey can be a warrior, but it's also can be like the world redeemer type character or the saint type character. You think about like the Buddha, or even I think Jesus. I think both of their stories follow the hero's journey too. And so that you could have sort of a feminine or masculine nature on either. But then it's like, what is that? So I want to put this sort of an aside, but I think it's interesting and relevant. Kind of my very in progress thoughts on what those two might be. Let me share my screen here. Because I would love to know what both of you think about this. Yeah, hold on a sec. Share my screen. Okay. Where is it? There it is. All right, can you all see my screen?
I can. Now we can. I added it.
Okay, sweet. Heath had
you may, if you can zoom in a little bit.
Yeah. Hold on. How do I zoom?
Say fit.
Is that better?
Oh no, there you go. That's better. Yeah, it's better. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So I was just kind of going through, and some of this was inspired by some of the stuff you've said, Doug. Some of this is also inspired by a book that I'm reading, which I'll come back to, which is the Heroine with 1,001 Faces, which I'm very early into. I've only read like a chapter.
I've read it by Maria Titon.
Yeah. I'm sure you have. I was like, I'm sure that was part of your research. But yeah, so I'll kind of go through some of these. It's just like some thoughts I'm on, and this is not about the structure, but in terms of what I would call a masculine or feminine character, right? So I'm thinking, you've got kind of like the difference between the projecting or the providing kind of nature versus the like nurturing or protecting. So these are kind of like the fatherly versus the motherly archetype. This right here, I think, is really relevant to storytelling. So I think about the courage to fight versus the courage to speak, because that's something that is mentioned in that book about like these characters are, they're like, related to unmasking the Minotaur. You're standing up and saying something, and you're drawing attention to something that's wrong. Also, there's the coalition built, which is kind of separate, but I put them together. The sort of like the monster taming as opposed to the monster slaying. So I think archetypically of, there's a hero that's faced with a dragon. What do they do? If they kill the dragon, they're embodying a more masculine archetype. If they then go and like free the dragon, break its spell and turn it into, a beautiful young guy or something, then that's to them doing something more feminine, right? Or they're befriending it and making it, changing its nature, kind of a thing. This one, I was thinking, this was related to what we were talking about earlier with rebellion. I think about a masculine character, especially like in old myths. They're the ones that are founding the kingdom. Maybe they're, someone's taken their throne and they have to come back and reclaim it. So there's a lot of like sort of empire building, or like, the sort of direct political power kind of stuff. Versus I think about feminine characters being more likely to, instead of building the empire, point out what's wrong in the empire and break down what is oppressive. And so there's more of like the standing against injustice and things like that. But glory seeking, justice seeking, this is kind of loose, like making a name for oneself in the world, as opposed to like improving the world, fixing what's broken, building a house versus making a home. That's very male, female, but I think it's also masculine, feminine when you think about kind of traditional divisions of labor. Competition versus kindness, like how, and again, that would be another character thing, like how you're solving certain problems. And then the final one that I put here would be like, because I think creativity might, I don't know if this is true, but it might have kind of a masculine aspect and a feminine aspect. Like I put like chaos versus order, which is something Jordan Peterson talks about like, converting the wilderness or raw materials into tools, into society. So that's kind of like that ordering creativity versus the more like intuitive or the spontaneous generation. I kind of associate that with like spirituality, enlightenment, bringing of life, and that there's a maybe more chaotic nature to that. I went through that really fast. but I'm excited. But what do you guys think about that in general? Just like,
well, Heath, do you want to go first?
No, you can put it all. Look, you can see it all at once. There we go.
No, well, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Because it's not like we're saying that every one of these has to be these things. Because I'm thinking about different things about.
And real life humans are always going to have aspects of both, right?
Well, right,
yeah, right. Yeah.
Because like the masculine, feminine glory seeking versus justice seeking. That was the one that stands out to me as the weirdest.
Yeah, that might be kind of weirdly worded.
So I would, and so I've thought about some of these things because I've begun to rethink the hero's journey. Now that I have this other context with the Heroine's Labyrinth. And you said glory seeking. I think that is this is just my take, and these are early thoughts. I would say competence seeking. And if you're highly competent, you tend to get accolades. And the reason, and I'm not saying that women aren't competent. That's not what I'm trying to say. No. I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, like, even like when I've played in sports and things like, there's a certain, you have to get the job done. You got to get this right. Even like when you're working out, sometimes you're training, lift, bar, push, thing, and that's the only thing you're focused on. Like, do this one thing right. And I think that those are competency issues. And that's why the reason I zeroed in on that word is because in the hero's journey with the mentor figure, there's a lot of focus on competency for the young hero or the immature hero trying to learn. You have to become competent. If you think about Luke Skywalker, again, he was incompetent. He left his training early. He was doing the handstand. Then he falls over and, Yoda's like, oh, Jesus, you're a mess. You can't do it. You can't stay focused. You can't become competent if you can't do these things.
Nico suggests proving competence instead of competence seeking, proving confidence. I do like that.
That might be good.
That might be better.
But it is thinking about, but you're also trying to become competent, I think, sometimes.
Yes.
Too, so.
But then also seeking to demonstrate that. I like the demonstration of that because that was why that line was weird, because Luke Skywalker didn't blow up the Death Star for glory. He got glory.
Right. He got it though. So I think I'll say in that 1,000. Say that again.
I said that wasn't the glory wasn't the purpose. He wasn't going out there.
Yeah, okay, right. That's a good point.
I think, and this is just my take. So when I read Maria's book, 1,000, and there's a couple of books that I've read where they get the hero's journey kind of wrong. They're kind of mischaracterizing it. There's another book that I've read, and the author, she has some brilliant things in there, but when she talks about the hero's journey, they're laughably terrible takes. It's like, oh yeah, it's all about poking things, and I'm like, that is not what the hero's journey is about. But sometimes when people misunderstand what the hero is doing, they'll focus on the accolade, the glory, and say, oh, well, that's what the hero wants. He's after glory. It's like, no, glory was the byproduct of an extremely competent series of events. And by the way, after he's awarded, he might have another thing that comes up and he's not going to solve it. He's got to re-engage and relearn a new set of competencies. But anyway, that's why I've zeroed on that one word when I've read the hero's journey.
That's a really good comment, because that was what stood out to Heath as being off. And so that was,
it sounds
right. I have to think about how to word that, but sorry.
I was going to say creative force. I really love how you put it on both. When I've been exploring, the most complex part of the Heroine's Labyrinth is the sacred fire, because it fans out and has different meanings to different parts of this, to different characters in the story. And when I thought about the sacred fire in the hero's journey, I realized it's also there, but it has a completely different meaning. In fact, wilderness, raw materials and the tools, society structure. Yeah. So yeah, obviously male characters or masculinity can be very creative as well. I always think about, did you ever see the movie Amadeus?
No.
Oh, it's one of the best movies. It's one of my all-time favorites. It focuses on Mozart it's actually a Heroine's Labyrinth story as told by the Minotaur. It's fantastic. But it focuses on Mozart, and he's incredibly creative. He's so creative. So he's able to build this thing. So I decided sacred fire is what I call you use the exact language, a creative force that attracts in the Heroine's Labyrinth, it attracts the Minotaur. and the Minotaur wants to capture that creative force one way or the other. With male characters, it tends to come out in terms of ethics. And I think it's interesting because fire can either burn you or warm you. It can bring light, or it can be a destructive force. So a lot of heroes focus heavily on how are you going to use your power, destructively or creatively. And the good guys are always taught to be ethical with their creative force, their ability to build instead of to destroy. That doesn't seem to show up in Heroine stories so much. The ethics of force, like the Karate Kid, Star Wars is an obvious. Are you going to be Cobra Kai or Miyagi-Do? Are you going to be a Sith or a Jedi? You know, this sort of either or with your creative powers. So I love seeing that because I feel like I'm on a similar dichotomy that you've got set up